Imagine a civilization that has been conquered by Greeks, overrun by Arabs, invaded by Mongols, threatened by Turks, Russians, and European empires, and yet, thousands of years later, its language is still spoken, its poetry is still read, its ancient kings are still remembered, and its identity still shapes one of the most important countries on earth. This is Iran. But Iran's story is not simply the story of Persia. It is older than the Persian Empire, more complicated than the legends of Cyrus the Great. And far more dramatic than the image of a mysterious, ancient kingdom surrounded by desert for thousands of years. Peoples, languages, religions, and dynasties have collided on this enormous plateau. Some built empires, some destroyed them, some arrived as conquerors, and eventually became part of the civilization they conquered. And again, Iran changed without completely disappearing. Tonight, we travel from the ancient Iranian plateau, Persepolis, from the fall of the Sasanians to the rise of Islam, from Mongol devastation to the Safavid transformation, oil and foreign intervention to revolution, war, and the modern Iranian state. This is the entire history of Iran, and the most surprising part is that the story never really ended. Long before anyone called this land the Persian Empire, civilizations were already rising across the Iranian plateau. The landscape itself shaped the people who lived here. Mountains surrounded fertile valleys, deserts separated settlements. The Caspian Sea opened routes toward Central Asia, and the Persian Gulf connected southern Iran to the wider Indian Ocean world. Among the earliest major civilizations was Elam, centered in southwestern Iran. Its capital, Susa, would survive for thousands of years and later become important to Persian kings. Then came the peoples we know from later Iranian history, the Medes and Persians. Among them, they were not suddenly created by one king. They emerged from a much older world of migration, trade, warfare, agriculture, and cultural exchange. Then, around the 6th century BCE, one ruler changed the scale of the story. His name was Cyrus, better known as Cyrus the Great. He began as ruler of Anshan. Then he defeated the Medes. He expanded west into Lydia, and in 539 BCE, Babylon fell. Within decades, a kingdom on the Iranian plateau had become an empire stretching across enormous parts of the ancient Near East. Cyrus did something that would become characteristic of Persian imperial rule. He did not simply destroy every local institution. He often incorporated existing elites and administrative structures into his empire that did not make the empire peaceful or democratic by modern standards. It was an ancient empire built through conquest, but its durability depended upon administration as much as military power, and Cyrus left behind something more powerful than territory. He created a model of Persian kingship that later rulers would repeatedly revive. The empire had begun. Cyrus created the empire, but his successors turned it into an imperial machine. Darius the Great reorganized the realm. He strengthened administration, expanded roads, standardized taxation, and established royal centers, including Persepolis. Walk through Persepolis today, and the stones still tell the story. Delegations from different peoples appear in procession: Persians, Medes, Egyptians, Babylonians, and others. From across the empire, the message was unmistakable. The empire was enormous, but the king stood at its center. Darius also expanded Persian power into parts of the Aegean world. His successor, Xerxes, continued the conflict with the Greek city-states. The Persian Wars would eventually become one of the foundational stories of Western civilization. But there is a danger in viewing them only through Greek eyes. The Persian Empire was not simply the villain in a Greek adventure story. It was one of the largest political systems of the ancient world. Its territory stretched from the Aegean and Egypt toward Central Asia and the Indus region. It contained countless peoples, and its rulers had to solve a problem every empire eventually faces. How do you control enormous distances without destroying the diversity that makes the empire function? The Persians answered through roads, governors, taxation, armies, royal ideology, and local administration. For nearly 2 centuries, the Achaemenid Empire dominated the region. Then, from the west, came another young conqueror, Alexander of Macedon. In 331 BCE, at Gaugamela, the Persian king Darius III was defeated. Persepolis was eventually burned. The first great Persian empire was gone. But Persia itself was not. Alexander conquered Persia, but conquering a civilization is not the same as replacing it. After Alexander's death, his empire fragmented. Greek-speaking Seleucid rulers controlled much of the Iranian world. Yet local Iranian powers continued to rise. Then came the Parthians. Their Arsacid dynasty created a powerful empire, challenged Rome for centuries. Parthians were famous for cavalry warfare. Their mounted archers could fire while retreating. The famous Parthian shot became legendary. Rome discovered that the Iranian plateau was not easy to conquer. In 53 BCE, the Roman general Crassus marched east. He expected victory instead. At Carrhae, the Roman army was shattered by Parthian forces. It became one of Rome's most humiliating defeats. The rivalry between Rome and Iran would continue for centuries, but eventually the Parthians themselves weakened, and another Iranian dynasty emerged, the Sasanians, founded by Ardashir I in 224 CE. They presented themselves as heirs to an older Persian imperial tradition. The Sasanian Empire became the last great pre-Islamic Persian empire. Its rulers built monumental architecture, developed sophisticated administration, supported Zoroastrian institutions, and fought Rome and Byzantium for supremacy. The rivalry was enormous, and eventually it became destructive. By the early 7th century, the Sasanian Empire and Byzantine Empire had exhausted themselves through decades of war. Then a new power appeared from Arabia. Islam and Iran was about to experience the greatest transformation in its history. The 7th century brought catastrophe. Arab-Muslim armies defeated Sasanian forces in a series of battles. Ctesiphon fell, and by the middle of the 7th century, the Sasanian state had collapsed. The last Sasanian king, Yazdegerd III, fled eastward. He tried to find support, but the empire he inherited was already fractured and Yazdegerd was killed. A dynasty that had ruled for more than 4 centuries was finished. Imagine the personal tragedy. A king running from the ruins of his empire, watching the political world that had defined his family disappear behind him. But this is where the story becomes more complicated. The Arab conquest changed Iran profoundly. Islam spread. Arabic became the language of administration in many contexts. Zoroastrian institutions lost their privileged position. But Persian culture did not disappear. Instead, transformed over the following centuries. Iranian scholars, administrators, poets, scientists, and rulers helped shape Islamic civilization. The Persian language evolved into New Persian, and eventually, Persian literature became one of the great literary traditions of the Islamic world. This is one of the central paradoxes of Iranian history. Iran was conquered, but the conquerors did not erase Iran. Iran became Islamic, while remaining deeply Iranian. The old empire had died, the civilization had not. For centuries after the Arab conquest, Iran became a crossroads of competing dynasties. Samanids. Ghaznavids. Seljuks. Khwarazmians. And many others. Persian culture spread far beyond the political borders of Iran. Came one of history's most devastating invasions. Mongols. In the 13th century, Mongol armies swept across Iran. Cities were destroyed, populations were devastated, political structures collapsed. The trauma was immense. But once again, the conquerors eventually became part of the civilization they had conquered. The adopted Persian administrative traditions. Persian scholars served Mongol rulers. And Iranian intellectual life slowly recovered. Then came Timur. Armies were extraordinarily destructive, yet his successors sponsored architecture, literature, science, and art. Herat and Samarkand became major centers of culture. Iranian history repeatedly demonstrates the same strange pattern: destruction, adaptation, recovery, transformation, and then another empire. By the end of the 15th century, the Iranian plateau was politically fragmented, but in Arabia, a religious movement had been evolving for generations. Its leader would be young, ambitious, and determined to unite Iran. His name was Ismail. In 1501, Shah Ismail I captured Tabriz and established the Safavid dynasty. Was one of the greatest turning points in Iranian history. The Safavids united much of Iran under one political authority, but they did something even more consequential. Established Twelver Shi'ism as the state religion. That decision permanently changed Iran's relationship with its neighbors. The Ottoman Empire to the west was predominantly Sunni. The Safavid state became a major Shi'ite power. Religion became part of political identity. And Iran acquired a distinctive religious character that continues to shape the country. Today, then came Shah Abbas I. Under Abbas, the Safavid state reached a high point. Isfahan flourished. Architecture transformed the city. Trade expanded, and the Safavid strengthened their military and administration. The famous phrase associated with Isfahan's beauty is Isfahan Nesfi Jahan. Isfahan is half the world. The exact historical attribution of the phrase is complicated, but the sentiment captures the city's extraordinary reputation. The Safavid period connected Iran more deeply to European diplomacy and commerce, but no empire lasts forever. By the early 18th century, the Safavid state weakened. Afghan forces captured Isfahan in 1722. The dynasty collapsed. Yet again, Iran would rebuild. The 18th and 19th centuries brought a new kind of threat, not simply armies, but empires with global economic power. The Qajar dynasty ruled Iran from the late 18th century into the 20th. Iran became caught between Russian expansion to the north and British strategic interests to the south and east. The country was losing territory. Foreign powers were gaining influence, and many Iranians began asking a dangerous question: who actually controls Iran? The answer became even more complicated when oil was discovered by the 20th century. Oil had transformed Iran's strategic importance. Then came Mohammad Mossadegh, a nationalist politician, who became prime minister in 1951. His government nationalized the Anglo-Iranian Oil Company. For many Iranians, this was about sovereignty. Who should control Iran's natural resources? For Britain, it threatened a major economic interest. For Washington, Cold War concerns increasingly shaped the crisis. In 1953, Mossadegh was overthrown in a coup involving Iranian actors and covert British and American operations. Declassified U.S. government records document the planning and implementation of the operation. For many Iranians, 1953 became more than a political event. It became a memory, a warning, a symbol of foreign intervention, and decades later, that memory would return. After 1953, Mohammad Reza Shah became increasingly powerful. Iran modernized rapidly. Cities expanded. Education grew. Industry developed. Women gained new legal and educational opportunities in several areas. Iran became an important U.S. ally, but modernization came with political repression. The security service Savak became associated with surveillance and suppression. Political opposition was restricted. Economic inequality remained, and rapid modernization disrupted traditional social structures. The Shah's government celebrated Iran's ancient Persian heritage. Ancient kings were placed at the center of national symbolism. But for many opponents, the monarchy itself had become a symbol of authoritarianism and foreign dependence. Then, 1978, protests spread. Different groups joined the opposition. Religious conservatives, nationalists, leftists, students, merchants, ordinary citizens. They did not all want the same future, but they increasingly agreed on one thing: the Shah had to go. In January 1979, the Shah left Iran. In February, Ayatollah Ruhollah Khomeini returned. The monarchy collapsed, and Iran became an Islamic republic. But revolution did not bring immediate peace. It brought another crisis. On November 4, 1979, Iranian students seized the U.S. Embassy in Tehran. More than 50 Americans were taken hostage. They would be held for 444 days. For Americans watching television, Iran suddenly became personal. The hostage crisis dominated the news, and it permanently transformed the relationship between Iran and the United States. Then came war. On September 22, 1980, Iraq invaded Iran. Saddam Hussein's government believed revolutionary Iran was vulnerable. The war would last nearly 8 years. At first, Iraq advanced, but Iran resisted. The conflict became a brutal war of trenches, missiles, artillery, chemical weapons, and mass mobilization. Cities were attacked, families were separated, young soldiers died by the thousands. The war became known in Iran as the imposed war. It became part of the national memory. And here is the David and Goliath element of the story, but with an important historical qualification. Iran was not literally a tiny country fighting a giant. Instead, it was a newly revolutionary state with a disrupted military facing a heavily armed Iraqi invasion backed by significant foreign assistance. Iran survived. The war finally ended in 1988 after both sides accepted UN Security Council Resolution 598. The cost was enormous, and the war left a psychological scar that remains central to Iran's political memory. After the war came reconstruction, then new political movements, reformers, conservatives, presidents, protests, sanctions, nuclear negotiations, and continuing confrontation with the United States. Iran entered the 21st century, carrying all of its earlier histories at once: ancient Persian identity, civilization, Shi'ite, political culture, revolutionary ideology, memories of foreign intervention, and the trauma of war. So what is Iran? Is it Persia? Yes, but not only Persia. Is it an Islamic country? Yes, but its history began more than a millennium before Islam. Is it the land of Cyrus? Absolutely. But it is also the land of poets, scholars, merchants, soldiers, revolutionaries, families, and millions of ordinary people who lived through events they never chose. Iran's history cannot be reduced to its rulers, because rulers changed, empires disappeared, religions transformed, languages evolved, borders moved, but the civilization adapted. The Achaemenids disappeared, the Sasanians disappeared, the Safavids disappeared, the Qajars disappeared, the Pahlavi monarchy disappeared. Iran remained. That may be the central lesson of Iranian history. Conquest does not always mean cultural extinction. Sometimes the conquered civilization changes the conqueror. Persian language reshaped Islamic civilization. Persian literature traveled across Asia. Iranian art influenced courts from Anatolia to India, and the country's ancient memory continues to influence modern identity. For Americans, Iran's history matters for another reason. The relationship between Iran and the United States did not begin with the 1979 hostage crisis. It sits on top of older stories involving oil, Cold War politics, foreign intervention, revolution, war, and competing ideas about sovereignty. Understanding Iran, therefore, means understanding more than today's headlines. It means understanding a civilization that has spent thousands of years answering the same question: how do you survive when the world around you keeps changing? Iran's answer was adaptation. Again and again and again, from Persepolis to ISFHAN, from the ruins of CTESIPHON to the streets of Tehran. The story continues, because Iran is not simply an ancient empire that disappeared. It is a civilization that survived its empires, and that may be the most important part of its history.